This is Tim Hurley. I'm here with Dan Hochhalter. That is a German last name.
You got it.
German descent. Can you speak German? Are the parents from off the boat, or what are we dealing with?
No. My dad's side is from Germany, but that's many generations ago. So no, he grew up in North Dakota, and then his family moved to Minnesota, and that's where I was born and raised.
Awesome, huge German presence out there in Minnesota too, isn't it? Yeah,
for sure.
Very cool.
Germans and Scandinavians and all that stuff.
All of the above, all the Nordic regions, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. Go Skol Vikings, right?
All right, so you are the fiddle player for Dierks Bentley. You're currently on the road with Dierks, but you've played with so many different musicians. It's insane. Can you give us a little rundown of all the people that you've played with without taking more than 18 minutes?
Sure. That's very nice of you to say. Yeah, I moved to Nashville about 20 years ago. Actually, it's probably about 20 years to the day. I moved in like October of 2002. So it was right around this time 20 years ago. And my first audition led to my first gig, and that was with a country band called Lone Star. Had a bunch of hits back in the day. Yeah, for sure. And I played with them for a couple of years, and then around 2005, on the heels of Redneck Woman taking over the planet, I joined up with Gretchen Wilson for a while and toured with her for a bit. And then I did a couple months with John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival. He was kind of doing like a country flair on his kind of stuff, and I played with him for a couple months, and Easton Corbin for a couple months, and then wound up auditioning and getting the gig with Dierks, and that was like 12 years ago. So yeah, that's kind of been like the main stuff. I've had the pleasure and honor of doing some fill-in work or some TV shows with Carrie Underwood and Keith Urban, but those are kind of the main ones that I've actually like toured with and spent time with on the road. So yeah, it's been quite a ride. It's been fun.
It's crazy. So you said basically you got your break with Lone Star. How did you get in with those guys? Was that a full-on just audition, or did you know somebody at the time? How'd that all work out?
Well, I knew two people that were Nashville based before I moved down here. One of them was both fiddle players. One of them was named Nick Hoffman. He's from Minnesota, and he was Kenny Chesney's fiddle player for a long time. I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, something like that. A good while. And Nick and I kind of knew of each other growing up in Minnesota. We would cross paths at fiddle contests and stuff. And he was playing in a cover band. And then when he moved to Nashville, I wound up taking his gig in this cover band. So I was kind of able to see through him, like, okay, you can move to Nashville and find your way and maybe get a gig. And like, it just kind of made it seem, seeing him do it kind of made it seem a little more just realistic and a little more accessible, like, oh, well, I know him, but he did it. Maybe I can do it too, But the person that helped me get the gig was a guy named Roddy Chong. He's a fiddle player, violinist that was out with Shania Twain in her heyday. And he was playing with some other country artists kind of when she was off. He did some stuff with Shadazy, and he was touring with Lone Star. And I befriended him just through the internet, really, just emailing and kind of messaging back and forth. And he was nice enough to answer my questions and just kind of, take me under his wing a little bit. And it turned out, I didn't even know this at the time, it turned out he was playing with Lone Star and he was getting ready to leave and go back to play with Shania. And he was like, you seem like you'd be a good fit. Like, do you want to audition or like come down and see like what? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So they auditioned me. I went to the guitar player's house in Franklin, and it's so crazy, but I hadn't even really officially moved to town yet. I just drove down basically to audition, and I stayed in the Best Western off of Music Row for like a week. And I auditioned, and then he's like, all right, yeah, why don't you come out this weekend? We'll see what happens. So I got on the bus and I played the weekend. And then at the end of the weekend, they're like, all right, that was fun. We're going to look at a few more people and we'll let you know. So I was like, well, all right. Ooh. So I drove back to Minnesota and I was like, well, that was fun. I probably won't ever hear from them again, but what a cool experience.
Is that what like 3 weeks later, when they said that to you, was your first thought?
Yeah,
like, well, that was that. Well,
it felt like it was like the weekend went really well. And I was like, uber prepared. Like I listened to their music for like, a month leading up to the audition and just like learned every single nuance of every song I could. I was like overly prepared, but still you never know. Like, I'm this 20-year-old kid at the time and totally green and don't know where to put my bag on the bus, much less like how to tour. So I was just kind of expecting that they would get somebody else that had some more experience, but I went back home, and then a couple weeks later, my phone rang and they're like, "Hey, you got the gig if you want it." And I was like, "Oh,
I want it.
Hey, mom and dad, I guess I'm moving to Nashville." So, so it was really crazy how that happened. And that's like, I almost feel guilty telling that story because there's so many people that come to town and just like toil for years and years. Then they finally get a break. And I got really lucky, it's what it boiled down to. I was prepared, of course, but super lucky. But yeah, I stayed with them for years, and then another opportunity came up, and it's just kind of, been this crazy path that I've been on, I guess.
That's pretty nuts when your first gig is getting on a tour bus and going out with a band that's like totally established. I mean, that has to set some precedents for you.
Well, it's bizarre. Yeah, it's crazy. Our Dierks' like guitar player, his name's Ben. We joke because he kind of had the same experience only in the bluegrass world. Like one of his first gigs was with Ricky Skaggs, and he like
crazy. Just
friend of a friend auditioned and wound up getting the spot. So it's, people always ask like, how do you get to do what you do? And like, what's the path? And there's just not a path. Like there's you ask 10 different people how they got their break, and you'll get 10 totally different answers. It's just, being in the mix is important, and being here, but yeah, it's just a lot of luck involved as well. There's no way around that.
That's crazy. So you said you've been in Nashville for 20 years. A whole lot has changed in Nashville. It looks like a completely different city than it did 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Was the fiddle player pool a little bit different in Nashville at that time as well? Because music has definitely changed, which we'll get to. But was there like a bigger fiddle player community at that time, a little bit more competitive, or?
Well, I think there were definitely more, at least on the road, seemed to be more fiddle players out there than there are now, for sure. Like I remember, whenever you would play on a festival or you were opening for somebody or somebody was opening for the act you were with or whatever, there was a fiddle player in like every band. Like almost all of them had a fiddle player. And it's kind of been a full like 180. When I started with Lone Star, I played fiddle on every song except for one. They did a cover of a Pink Floyd song, and I picked up a Strat and just kind of played along. Really, just kind of played guitar on like one song, but I played fiddle on everything else. And now,
they wouldn't even give you 20 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but now fast forward 20 years, and in Dierks' show, like I play guitar on 80-90% of the songs, and I play fiddle on like 3, so it's just like, yeah, music definitely has shifted a lot. And there's, there was a time where I think there were like 3 or 4 fiddle players that I knew that like kind of had main gigs and like were able to like do that full time. It's just, where they used to be 20, used to have 20 or 30 friends that were out there. Now there's it's coming back. It's shifted in the last few years, but there was a time where it was Janae and me, and that was kind of it. It was kind of crazy.
I mean, so in Nashville right now, do you feel like every single fiddle player that's available?
No, I mean there's so many people that moved to town and younger folks. I'll watch an award show, be like, oh, that guy's got a fiddle player. I don't know who he or she is, and I think that just comes
go
with
up a little bit.
Being
like, wait a minute, who is that guy?
Wait a minute, who's this young kid? Yeah, exactly. Who's this young kid with better hair that'll work for cheaper? Hang on, I don't like this situation at all. so yeah,
I mean, you play a bunch of instruments. So was fiddle always the passion, and then you had to kind of pick up the other stuff just to be on tour and be more relevant as a business person, or how did that work out?
Yeah. I mean, I started playing violin when I was like 3 or 4 years old. So that's been my main instrument my whole life.
Were you classically trained, or was it always kind of country-ish?
I was, yeah. I started with the Suzuki violin method when I was like a kid, and we didn't have a piano in my house, but my grandma, who used to watch me and my sisters, told my parents that she thought I was musically inclined for whatever reason. And my parents were like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I guess they were watching TV one night and saw a bunch of little kids, hacking away on a violin. And they were like, "Oh, maybe he'd like that." So they just got me this little violin, and I started taking lessons, and I stuck with that until I was probably like 9 or 10, something like that. And I was kind of bored with it. I didn't really love like playing these classical songs, like it just wasn't my thing. I wanted to play baseball and just do other kid stuff. I wasn't really into it. But we were at a county fair and saw this like fiddle contest, and I saw these people playing, the violin in a totally different way. And at the same time, this was like the early 90s. Country music is like exploding and it's everywhere. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Hey, this is this Alan Jackson song. That's a violin. Like it's just played differently. So kind of shifted gears. And my parents found a fiddle teacher that kind of taught more of that, bluegrass and not classical style, just went from there. So yes, violin's been my main instrument. Some things I've picked up just out of fun. Like I bought a guitar when I was a kid and started learning chords on that. Mandolin is tuned tuned exactly the same as a fiddle. So your left hand, you kind of already understand, and then you just got to kind of get the picking down a little bit. But yeah, there's also an element of like, hey, we need a piano on this one song. It's like, well, I'll figure it out because I want to stay here, and I want to have this gig, or we need somebody to figure out how to run our backing tracks, which we don't use a ton of, but we do a little bit. It's like, well, yeah, I'll figure that out, So there's an element of that too, just to try to keep your gig.
Stay relevant.
Stay relevant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I love that you brought up backing tracks, because now especially in recording, so many people are like veering away from using actual musicians. I mean, there's all this sampling going on and this and that. I mean, how, as a musician, when you hear some of this stuff on the radio and that's being recorded and other, openers maybe for you, does it make you cringe? Are you like, this is brutal. This is not even an art anymore. This is just like a computer software that's pieced this thing together.
Honestly, no, not really. I'm kind of cool with everything. There was a time where I was like, I'd get puffed up like, oh, there's, this isn't real music because there's not people doing it. But that's a whole different skill set to use those electronic elements and those samples and stuff and putting that all together in a musical way is a totally like I respect anybody that does that as well. And but it is interesting just to. I wouldn't love to be a drummer right now, because drums are a thing that can be really, there's a certain feel obviously with the live drummer and that sort of thing. But, you crack a snare drum, it's really easy to just hit a key on a keyboard and get that kind of same sound, They haven't really mastered the fiddle virtual instrument yet. So I feel a little bit of safety in that notion, but yeah, it's all good for me for sure.
I'm surprised. I love everybody in Nashville is so nice about it. Everyone's so diplomatic. Like, well, it's a totally different skill set. It's really important to have it. There's a band. I won't name names because I know no one will run with it with me because everyone's too diplomatic. But during the pandemic, they literally, and we're talking major sellout stadiums band. They did a 4-minute video on a production of a song and almost were bragging about the fact that there was not one single musician on it. I mean, I couldn't believe I'm like watching it and I'm like, how are you possibly doing in the middle of a pandemic? Everyone's looking for work. Nobody's touring. You're sitting in your mansion talking about how cool it is that I'm doing it. I can't even do it. But, and I'm like, that has to, as a musician, he's like out of work for 2 years. And I know, they probably aren't using fiddle anyway, but like how did you respond to that kind of stuff emotionally when people are really like overlooking the core of what Music City's all about?
Yeah, I didn't witness a ton of that, to be honest. I think we were too just like day to day trying to get through, our daughter not being in school and managing all that kind of stuff. And, I didn't witness a ton of that really, but it is a thing, there's and I understand both sides. Like there's been acts that, maybe we'll go out and tour and play big shows and not have a bass player at all. Like I've seen that several times with different bands. And, I understand that certainly the economic side of that, I understand that, but I also think that it's just gets a little boring to watch the three people on stage like for an hour and a half, even if you are there to see the artist, obviously, like, it's fun to see like, oh, what's that guy doing? And he's tweaking a knob back there on his amp. At least maybe that's just the musician nerd in me that enjoys seeing that kind of stuff. But I think there's an element of energy that can be brought with live musicians, of course. So hopefully that's not going away for forever, but I have noticed that trend for sure. Yeah,
it's crazy. I mean, and I got to say, like, you guys put on an incredible show with Dierks, right? And that's the performance factor is a huge part of it, but it also allows you to improvise and to do things a little bit differently. Isn't that part of the art of being a musician?
Yeah, sure. It's there's part of that too. So sometimes the shows it kind of depends on, what songs and what kind of moments in the show. Like some of our show is very scripted, where there's video content that plays along in sync with the music, in sync with the lights and all that kind of stuff. And there's not a whole lot of room to deviate, in those kinds of settings, because you have all these other elements that are all tied together. But then we'll have other parts of the show where, Dierks will do just as an example, we'll do a song called Bad Angel, which is off of his bluegrass record that came out 12 years ago. And it's not a big hit, and I don't know that a lot of people know the song per se that are at the show, but people enjoy seeing the fiddle and the mandolin and the banjo come out and like we're actually, playing off each other and listening to each other and like that, so I think it's good to have a balance of both of those things for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. So you're on the road with Dierks. Obviously, it looks like you guys have a ton of fun. And I want to get back to the live performance element of it as well, because you said, you're playing songs that aren't necessarily huge hits. And it seems like now, especially in country music, the shows are just hit. And if the artist doesn't have enough, they're like cover song that's a hit, like got to keep. Are there certain songs where you look out in the audience and you're like, every single time we play it, it's just not hitting with the audience? Like, and then maybe you go back and you shift the set, or how does that work?
Yeah, we're really, me and the rest of the band guys are really lucky, and I'm not just saying this, but we enjoyed Dierks' music. Like all of us, had purchased, except for the drummer, who's the drummer's been there with Dierks since before Dierks ever had a publishing deal, a record deal. He was Dierks' first drummer in Nashville, and he's been there ever since.
Crazy.
So he's an exception to this, but the rest of us, like we've. You go in my iTunes account and there's Dierks Bentley albums that I bought 15 years ago because I like the music, so it's always fun. And he's got so many hits now that we probably don't play 5 or 6 number one songs in the show because there's just not time.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's a long ways away from when you're a new artist and you have that one hit, but you got to play for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and you're playing album cuts and you're playing covers because, you want people to stay engaged. And it's a nice problem to have for sure, to have so many hits that we can't do them all in one night. So not really. The crowd always seems to really respond to the stuff that we do. We try to do mostly hits with a couple different, moments that are hopefully memorable, but in a different way. A new song, we may play a new song that people haven't heard before. And obviously people are kind of more listening attentively to that than getting into it because they can't sing along because they don't know the words,
Sure.
So,
at least they're not going out to get a beer.
yeah, exactly. When you see people heading for the aisles and going for the bathroom break, that, maybe this is a little lull in the show that we should tweak a little bit for sure.
That's so funny. Oh, you guys seem to have a blast. Hot Country Nights. How did that come to be exactly? Was that a whole band decision? And for any listener that doesn't know, Hot Country Nights is basically Dierks and his band in a 90s alternate universe, basically. And you guys open up every festival, which is amazing, by the way, because you're also giving a whole lot of love to the opening artists that might not be drawing people in. So you're doing them a big service, but
that's debatable. We're not sure if we're doing them any favors or not. We actually, for the last year, we've been closing the set with Hot Country Nights, but previous to that, you're right, we've opened every night, and we'll I remember a couple years ago we were touring with Tennille Townes, who was like the first act, but Hot Country Nights played right before her. And we would get off stage and we would joke to her like, all right, we've got them angry and confused. You're up. Because people
That's
didn't
awesome.
necessarily know what they were watching. They didn't know necessarily that Dierks was involved at all. But how it started, we were on the bus and a few of us were just talking about how it would be fun to put a 90s country band together and just like do a gig downtown on Broadway once a month. You know, it was just a few of us and like, oh yeah, that'd be fun. We can learn this set list. And we all, you know, this was maybe 6 years ago. And, you know, we were all excited about learning that music and revisiting it because we all grew up on it. You know, a lot of us did anyway. And then it kind of evolved like, well, Dierks got wind of it. He's like, well, hang on, that would be fun. Let's do that.
He's and then
like, I want to do that. We're like, oh, really? Okay, awesome. That's even better. And then, well, we should dress up like 90s, you know, like we should get the shirts, get the Brooks and Dunn flame shirts and all the stuff. And then it just kind of morphed into a thing. Like we never expected that we would record a record, which we did a few years ago. We never expected that we would tour as Hot Country Nights and play shows opening for Dierks every night. Like it really just started as we should start a cover band and play at Whiskey Row once a month downtown. Like that's kind of how it started. But now it's kind of morphed into this thing. So yeah, it's the best. It's interesting. Have you seen a Hot Country Nights performance before?
And so I'm also like a big 90s country fan. That's my preference, but I love that you brought up Tenille Townes because that's a perfect example. I went to the show in 5 Point Amphitheater out here in Orange County, and I heard that day that Hot Country Nights was actually Dierks Bentley. I didn't even know if it was like a DJ. I didn't know what the hell it was.
What it was, right? Yeah.
So I show up and I'm like, this is hilarious, but I'm in the crowd and people are like, who the hell are these guys? Like, what is going on?
For sure.
Here? And like had no idea. And it was great. You guys did the watermelon crawl and it's like Orange County and everyone's just standing there. And we got a line dancing community out here, and stuff, but like no one was moving. And you guys are like, oh, you know, and just yelling at people. And I'm like, this is the best ever. But it made me really like learn about Tenille because I didn't know who she was at all. Yeah. And so then I was just dialed in and I'm like, you know, I play music. And so I was like, this is actually awesome because honestly, 90% of the times I'm probably not going to get there in time. I'll probably still be at the bar. I'll be hanging out, you're grabbing dinner, and then you get there for like the direct support and then the headliner. I'm like, wow, for sure. Really laid it out. And it made me, you know, see Tenille and I'm like, this girl's great. And I like dialed in and that was kind of a highlight of the show.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear because we didn't know if we were doing her any favors or not. You know, we'd get out there and fight with each other and yell at the crowd and do these silly dance moves and stuff. And then, all right, Tenille, you're up. Like, well, what just happened? You know, so that's good to hear. I'm glad. We turned you into a Tenille fan because she's awesome. We love her.
Yeah, she's great. But it was hilarious too because like what a different tone, right? She comes out as like I think it was just her and a guitar maybe at that point, maybe a couple people like on a cajon and just like subdued, beautiful, angelic voice. And I'm like, that was a little different.
That's for sure.
I also got to say, I don't usually buy merch when I go to concerts. But I bought a Hot Country Nights t-shirt and I got it
nice,
just a little bit too small.
Oh dang! What size you need? I can hook you up.
That's what I did it intentionally. I'm like, I'm gonna rock.
Okay,
just
perfect.
It's hugging a little too tight, and it's like one of my favorites.
That's what you need. Yeah, I love it, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I like the Hot Country Nights merch for sure. It's a good aesthetic. Did you get the old school one that had like there was one that was the hot was spelled kind of like with like tiny string. Or kind of like bar letters, and then there was the hot was like really bold and blue. Like, is that the one you got? Or pink?
Mine
it was bold and pink.
Yeah, I got the
just
bold
big
pink
and pink.
One.
Yeah,
yep.
The new school. Yeah, that's awesome.
Into it.
I love it. That's great.
So, how'd you come up with your alternate personality? Everybody has an alternate personality in Hot Country Nights, and you're like, I think you're a Russian fiddle player. And how do you say Terry? Is it Terry? Is that how you pronounce the name?
Terry. Yeah. His full name is Teratej, and his last name is Dvorchakinsky. But everybody calls him Terry. But I mean, how that came about, I honestly have no idea. I think I thought it would be humorous to be just somebody who wasn't from America that loved all things America. Like the backstory is, he's like a diehard Lee Greenwood fan and is just like bleeds red, white, blue, and just loves everything about America, but he's not American. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But at the time, like nobody was really talking about Russia at all. Like this was pre Trump getting elected and all the stuff that happened. So it was kind of weird that like, oh, now Russia's like in the news and now I'm this like Russian guy. Like, is that a thing? There was chapters where I wasn't like, I didn't act like I was a Russian guy for a little while because I just wasn't sure if it was too sticky of a thing. But yeah, I just thought it'd be funny. And I was at our bass player's house. We were like looking at 90s clothes and stuff. And he had a book on his coffee table written by Terry. And I was like, oh, Terry is a good name. I like Terry. And then I kind of made up a Russian name that could be shortened to Terry. So I don't know, just not too much of a story, I guess, but I just thought it'd be interesting. Yeah.
I love the idea of like a really angry fan that doesn't get the joke about Hot Country Nights just being like, damn Russians.
Yeah.
Like, you're invading our territory.
Yeah. There may have been there. Yeah. Well, we played a gig. It was in Nashville. It was for Whiskey Jam. Hot Country Nights played one night. And this was like during the heat of
the outside stage, right?
It was outside thing. Yeah. Yeah. It was really fun. It was really crazy. But I did a version of Tracy Bird's We're From the Country and I Like It That Way. But I've made it, I'm not from this country and I like it that way. And it was kind of like, it wasn't really on brand for the character, but kind of pro-Russian, like anti like, not anti-American, but just kind of making fun of President Trump at the time and stuff.
Sure.
And somebody came up after the show and was just so irate that we went there for it. And it definitely hit a nerve with this person. She was very upset that we were, poking fun at the size of President Trump's hands, supposedly, and just like, well, I forget what the words were, but
when you say supposedly, what do you mean?
I mean, I've never met him, so I can't speak. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Professional answer right there. Professional answer.
Yeah. So yeah, it was the Russian thing has been, there was some sticky moments for sure, but I think we're, we don't really play into it too much now, especially, I mean, there's a war going on. So like, I don't know. We just don't say anything Russian at all. You can probably edit all this out.
No chance. No, I mean, it's true. It's a reflection of the times that we're in. And especially in country music, there's so much going on now and there's political push and pull. And it seems like every day there's a bit of a controversy. Do you guys feel like you have to maybe put a lid on what your personal beliefs might be, whichever way they go, one way or another, just to maintain relevance to all parties that are going to the shows?
Yeah, I think we, the band is all, we're all walks of life in our band, and we there's no reason to really go down that road as far as I can tell. We're there to play music, and we're there to hopefully bring a sense of community for whoever's there. We all love this country, and Dierks has patriotic songs that we'll do sometimes, and it's just I don't have any qualms if you are an artist and you speak your political beliefs. I think that's great. I think that there's some things definitely worth speaking for, but at the same time, like, it's a concert, and hopefully everybody's there to just have a good time.
Tread lightly. It should be a community builder, not divisive.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you've been on the road with Dierks for a long time now. If there's another artist, if for some reason like Dierks hung it up, who would be the number one artist next in line that you'd love to be on the road with or love to perform with?
Man, that's a tough question. We both we all I should say feel just so fortunate to play with Dierks. Like he treats us all really well. He's a great music, great guy, great everything. So it'd be hard to really pick somebody else. I know that sounds like kind of a political answer, but I'm really, really happy where I'm at. I think it'd be fun to, somebody who's maybe not on the road as much right now. Like I grew up loving Al Jackson. Like I had every one of his CDs, and I just loved all of his music in the 90s, especially. So that would be really fun to get to play some of that stuff, and just, I think anybody like that that's kind of from that era, like when I was growing up and when I was kind of falling in love with country music, anything like that would be a total treat. You know, like doing a show with Garth would be amazing. That would be incredible just to have that experience. So I think somebody like that would be really cool. But yeah, love working with Dierks. He's treats us all so well. Great guy, and really happy to be there. It's been 12 years, which is a long time, and
crazy,
and it doesn't feel like it. So that's a good thing.
Well, you mentioned Alan Jackson. He's one of my favorites as well, and one of my favorite songs is "Murder on Music Row." Do you believe that there is a murder on Music Row right now?
I don't know. Had you asked me that when that song came out, I would have been like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, country music's dead, but there's so many types of country music out there, and you know, it's what's on the radio or not on the radio. You know, I'm of the belief that if you don't like what's on the radio, then you know, fire up your Spotify and play something you like, because there's so much music out there.
Whoa! Remember my job here. Keep listening.
Switch stations.
Eventually,
How about that?
No. Stay on Go Country 105 at all times. Something will come on that you like. I promise you.
Well, there you go. Well, I don't have the pleasure of listening to your station, but I'm sure you guys have that playlist dialed in, and nobody strays. I'm sure, but you know, there's just so much out there that there's so many types of country music. You know, you've got Tyler Childers on one spectrum, and somebody like, I don't know, like Maren Morris on the other spectrum, and just like everything in between is there's something for everybody, which is kind of the great thing about it.
Another diplomatic answer. Next time we're getting beers and we're going to do this tequila shots, and we're going to get this interview going again and get the real deal. You know?
No, that's really how I feel. I promise.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Well, man, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I would love to be able to provide your socials to anybody listening today. Is that all right with you? How can people find you if they want to stay tuned on what you got going on?
Yeah, sure. I'm not I don't post as much as I maybe should, but I'm at Fiddlin' Dan on I think Instagram and Twitter. I'm not on Snapchat. I'm not on TikTok, but
Thank God. Grown men unite. I can't do it either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I'm there, and shoot me a message, and love to chat for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. This was an absolute pleasure. A big fan of yours and everything you're doing. And hopefully we can do it again sometime down the line.
I hope so. Yeah. Thank you so much.